to our second workshop. My name's Garrett. I'm the founder of Ambition and Motion. I'm so happy, I'm so excited, I'm so grateful to have you here for our second workshop. I am pumped for you to experience our guest speaker later on this evening. But before we get started, I want to touch up on a couple of quick points. So you are starting your mentor relationship. That is awesome. Hopefully you've had your first conversation. I'd love to learn about it. Post maybe some of the key talking points that you've had for your first meeting in the comment section. Would love to learn about how that first meeting has gone. But yeah, this workshop's all about how to network in a genuine way and really make the most out of it. This workshop should be about an hour long. As a reminder, I'm going to ask you 3 questions during the duration of this workshop. Once we have asked those questions, I'll expect you to answer them. That's how you get credit for participating and being here at the workshops. I'm really excited for you to experience our guest speaker tonight. I'm really excited to dive into this. Now, this is what's really key. I mean, genuine networking is such a pivotal component to building rapport, to getting job offers, to getting promotions. Really, if you can hone this skill, if you can hone this ability, you will be set professionally, because ultimately, at the end of the day, your hard skills, that being your ability to crunch numbers, to do some form of engineering, to do some form of science, like all those things are pretty good. They're very easy to measure. So it's very clear whether or not you are better or worse than somebody on a hard skill. But your soft skills are much more difficult to measure. But those soft skills are really what's going to set you apart. I mean, as they say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And this is the workshop about how you can know more people and have a stronger bond with them, because then it goes to your reputation. Because if you have a reputation for treating people like garbage, you're not going to have a great reputation. People are going to want to help connect you with other people. If you come in with low energy, if you come in with a bad state, if you come in talking trash about other people, you're not going to put yourself in a good position. And so I want to be very clear. When it comes to networking, when it comes to building a relationship, it is not all about the transaction. If you're coming into a networking situation, you're thinking to yourself, what is in it for me? You are not going to have a positive outcome. I promise you on that. I really want to be clear. It's not all about landing the job or the internship. Sometimes it's about building the relationship and then playing the long game, because ultimately that may turn into an opportunity because they built a rapport with you. But if you burn them, or if you make them feel like you are using them to get to a location that you would like to be, they can smell that on you. They can smell it from a mile away. And that is not great. As they say, desperation reeks. You do not want to be desperate. You don't want to be perceived as someone that's a user or a taker. You want to be a giver. You want to be someone who gives energy to relationships. The first place to start is being genuine with how you talk to people and how you build rapport with people. Now, this is something we talked about last time, but it is so important, and that is the 3 keys to success in this program. That is honing your strategy, your story, and your state. As we've said before, your state is most important. So physically, how are you? Physically, what is going on with your world? Physically, I don't care what is happening. If you recently broke up with your significant other, if your dog just died, if you got some bad news, I don't care what's going on. If you get up, if you shake it out, if you let it loose, you will get yourself into a positive state. So I want to challenge you to do that right now. I want you to get up, and I want you to shake it loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah, just let it out, let it loose, let it go. Because what you're doing is you're releasing blood to your brain. You're releasing endorphins. You're getting yourself into a state conducive for retaining information. If you're just sitting there on a couch or in a chair in a slumped over position, your likelihood of retaining any of the information we talk about tonight is severely diminished. But if you come in standing up, moving around, getting your blood flowing, you are much more likely to retain this information. Have you ever found it difficult in a classroom setting to remember what your professor says if you've been sitting for 3 hours? That's why 3-hour lectures really struggle to work. They're not very effective because people are not moving around. Your brain needs blood to retain information. So get up, get moving, get out, get loose. Now, the second key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself for why you will or will not be successful? I promise you right now, you will achieve up to the goals that you set for yourself in life and no higher. So you might as well shoot for the stars and land on the moon than shoot for the moon and end up in nowhere. Because if you are not focused about where you want to be, or really having a big, hairy, crazy, audacious goal for yourself, what are you doing? Like, are you just saying to yourself, like, I'm cool with winding up short, with, settling down and just settling for everything in my life? If that's the case, this program's not for you. I can tell you that right now. This program's not for you if you're trying to settle. But if you're someone that wants to go for it, if you want to go big, if you want to go out there for the opportunities that you want to see in your life, this program is absolutely for you. Let this program be a springboard. Let your mentor be a Sherpa that's guiding you up this mountain of life and success and help you get to where you want to be. This is someone who wants to guide you, that wants to help you. They wouldn't have signed up for this program if they weren't interested in seeing you succeed. So I want to be very clear with you. What is the story for why you will be successful? Understand that, hone it, be prepared. In fact, I would challenge you to write this down. Write it on a piece of paper. It's more likely to stick in your mind if you write it on a piece of paper of where you want to be. Stick it up on your wall, stick it up on your desk, stick it up on your dresser, stick it up on your mirror. Something that's going to remind you of where you want to be in 1 month, 3 months, 1 year from now. That will help you set the target of where you want to go. Because if you don't set these goals, you're going to be on a path that's got really no clear outcome of where you want to go. So the last part is your strategy. What are you going to do to set yourself apart? Now, when it comes to strategies, I'm a big believer in routines. When I say routines, I mean literally getting into a daily habit that you can practice regularly so then you can be better at a skill. We think about habits sometimes in a negative light because we think about people just being addicted to bad actions, but I believe that habits can also be attributed in a positive light as well. What is a positive habit you can get into to help you build more genuine relationships? I believe one thing you can do is to be intentional about having an informational interview every single week with a new person, with a new professional in your field. You can leverage LinkedIn. You could go to a professor's office hours. You could talk to a friend of yours whose parent works in the field that you're interested in working towards, or a family friend that you know works in the field that you're interested in working towards. If you set up one informational interview every single week, and by an informational interview, I want to be very clear. This is a conversation. This isn't an interview. You're not trying to get a job from this person. You're just trying to get knowledge about what this work is like. Set up one of those a week. I can promise you they're going to start making introductions for you. They're going to start helping you get to where you want to be. By the way, if your goals change over time, that's okay. That's totally okay. You can share with them how your goals have changed. They're going to want to keep helping you over time. I'll give you a perfect example of this. As an entrepreneur, I set goals all the time. I have a board of mentors. I literally have about 50 to 100 mentors that I send once every 3 months an update of what's going on with the business. Here's the thing though, I've pivoted this business many, many times. Now, initially when I first got started, I was thinking to myself like, oh, well, they're my mentors. Like, if I tell them that I've pivoted, will they think I'm a total failure? Will they not want to help me anymore? What I found is that is absolutely not the case. They're always there to support me. Mentors that have been with me for 5+ years still give me guidance, still help make introductions, still help me out and support me as my mission has grown, as my goals have grown. That is the nature of mentoring relationships. That is the nature of relationships in general. You should keep your network up to date with what is going on in your world because they will want to see you succeed. But the key is that you ask them for something specific. When I meet with my mentors or when I send them an email, I ask for something very, very specific. I don't say, hey, if you know anybody in XYZ space, if you could introduce me, would love that. Why? Because it's not at the top of their mind. What I'll do is I'll physically go onto their LinkedIn profile, look at who they're connected with and say, hey, I noticed that you're connected with Jane Doe, John Doe, Shelby Doe, and Jenny Doe. I know that you may not be connected with all 4 of those people, but if you are connected with one of them, would you mind introducing me? Here's an email template that you could copy and paste to introduce me. Now I've made it extremely specific and easy for them to take an action step to help me out. And that is how you can continue to grow your relationships, your network, and build rapport with people. And just keep them in the loop of what's going on in your world. So I just want to be very clear. It's about building genuine relationships. And it's about when you're building those genuine relationships and then you're asking them for introductions or connecting with more people through those relationships, being very specific and making it as easy as possible for them to help you out. I really want to stress this. It's so important. Genuine networking. If you can take anything from this whole program, if it's genuine networking, and by genuine networking, I mean really listening, taking an active and keen interest in who you are speaking with, you are going to be set. You're going to be in a great position. Because at the end of the day, it's not your elevator pitch. It's not going to be anything about you that makes someone interested in you. It's going to be about your ability to listen to them. In fact, I can tell you multiple times where I didn't say a word in a conversation. I just nodded my head yes and asked questions about things that somebody else has said. And at the end of the conversation, whether that be 30 minutes or 60 minutes long, they said, man, Garrett, you are such a great conversationalist. Or, gosh, I feel like I just had such a great conversation with you. And the funniest thing about it is I didn't actually say a word. The point is this: people love to talk about themselves. Why? Because people are really interested in things that they're interested in. People wouldn't choose to spend the time that they have on this earth in the way that they did unless they thought it was the most optimum way of spending their time. Therefore, things that interest them, things that they choose to spend their time on, are things that interest them and ultimately make you interesting to them because you've taken an interest in those actions and activities. I hope that makes sense. If you want to rewatch that, take that back 30 seconds because I think it's really important. People ultimately, at the end of the day, people care about themselves. People care about things that they are interested in because they've chosen to spend the time that they have on those tasks. So with that said, I'm excited to jump in to our guest speaker this evening. Really, the whole point of this workshop is about genuine networking. By the way, if you have not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'll add you to our LinkedIn group where we discuss different topics, and just you can add different topics, ask any questions, and expand us to our entire Ambition in Motion network. Connect with me. I'll add you to the group. But yeah, I'm so excited to get started. Let's jump into our guest speaker this evening. Hey everybody, welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to have you all here. I'm so excited to jump into the topic of our workshop this evening. It is on how to network in a genuine way. I know this may sound crazy. I know networking for a lot of students is a really interesting subject because sometimes it's perceived as not necessarily transactional, but it's like, hey, if I go out and network, I can get a job or an internship. And that is kind of like a corollary. It's like a subsequent thing that happens sometimes from networking, but it is not the intention of networking. Networking is about relationship building. We're talking about building genuine relationships with people. We've got an incredible guest speaker with us this evening. Her name is Denisha Jenkins. Denisha is the founder and CEO of the Cardia Group, where she helps leaders cultivate and maintain healthy, inclusive, and innovative cultures through consulting, training, and coaching services. Denisha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
So I think before we dive into just networking in a genuine way, could you share with us in the audience a little bit of your story and how you got into the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and I initially thought I wanted to be a surgeon, a doctor. I wanted to be a physician. I was really interested in math and science. I went to college, and along the way, I experienced a lot of incidents of racism from as early as my earliest childhood memory. So I just learned how to navigate those spaces. But once I got to college and having experienced a guidance counselor who operated a lot of covert racism and how they advised me or counseled me as a student, I did great in school. I was getting looked at by Ivy League schools, and the way that they advised me on, like, maybe you should try something a little easier when I have had like a stellar record as a student was intriguing to me. And so I decided to go somewhere where I got an academic scholarship. And my first semester of college, I had built up it was going to be this great experience, and it was awful. It was a horrible experience. And a lot of that came from what I learned to be institutional racism and understanding how systems work against certain groups. So it's something I knew of, but I really couldn't name it. And I got a break in an academic advisor being out sick, who was very resistant to helping me get help and get tutoring and all those things. When they say ask for help, I did all of those things. And I just felt like I had people in power who were letting me suffer. I happened to stumble upon a professor who taught multicultural class and gender studies, and the rest was history. So all my plans to be a physician went out the window. I realized I really wanted to peel back and understand how cultures work, how people behave in culture, how we identify and name ourselves based on cultural aspects, and how that either helps us or harms us as far as communities. And so that was just the beginning of it. And over the years, I've just done this work in different spaces. I've lived abroad and done this work. I lived in China, visited lots of countries, came back, lived in Boston. And so now I'm here in Austin, Texas, and I'm full-time working as an equity and inclusion consultant after years of side hustling as a consultant and just fully committed. And I'm doing this full-time now.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And to kind of even dovetail from your story into the topic of networking in a genuine way, one of the things that you do that I find is so unique, but also so, so powerful, is that you have conversations with CEOs of companies, a lot of times typically white men, who are very unaware of what is going on within their companies, and you are able to build genuine bonds and relationships with them, because it's a very fine line to walk, because we're talking about telling them something that they may not want to hear, while at the same time getting them to buy into our services and networking and building a relationship with them in a genuine way. Finding that balance between delivering someone some difficult news, but at the same time building that genuine bond is not easy. How do you do it? How did you develop that skill and ability over time? Because I would imagine perhaps when you first got started, some people were defensive when they started hearing some of what you were saying, and it took some time for them to come around to it. How do you go about doing that? And by the way, I think for students, if you're hearing this, you might think, oh, I'm not a business owner, I'm not consulting. If you're looking for a job, if you're trying to challenge the status quo, or potentially put yourself out there to an employer that might not necessarily consider you based on your background or anything else going on that you might have put in your mind, this is something absolutely you can take away from this in terms of networking in a genuine way. So Denisha, could you share with us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm always helping people navigate when it comes to, if you have a desire to become more efficient at communication or more efficient at leadership, a lot of that is going to be planted in your ability to be curious. So I think when people reach a place, so I think curious is a stepping stone to what we value in my company is cultural humility, right? There is an endpoint to how much you know, even about yourself. I don't know if anyone's ever been in a family and your family tells you things about yourself and everyone's agreeing. You're like, that's not me, right? Like there's a limit to how we're able to see ourselves and into what degree of truth. And so I think curiosity is essential to any level of connecting with people and networking. And really, the curiosity that's helped for me is recognizing what are some things that I know to be true? Humans are complicated. Humans are multifaceted. Humans think they know what they're doing and we don't. That's just pretty much essentially the truths that I stick to. And I am a very spiritual person. I do identify as Christian. I am Christian. And so I don't want to negate that I'm also driven by some of my belief systems of it matters how I treat people, even those who don't treat me well. So for me, those are just they have to go hand in hand for me to commit to my overall mission in my work and why I do what I do, but then also because they're still people and they matter to someone. And so that is something I hold on to that prevents me from treating people as transactions or treating people as projects, because I wouldn't want someone to treat me that way. And I've experienced that of being a token in a room, or I've experienced where people are like, oh, you're a Black person, you can speak for all. I've experienced that, right? And so I don't want to repeat that, and I hold myself accountable to that. So when it comes to talking to CEOs, especially those who have created a system that protects them from feedback that they don't like, I have to remind myself that I'm external, and so that means I can say things that they may not like. And the degree of intimacy with that relationship there's a cutoff point, right? And I'm there to do a job. I've been brought in sometimes by committees or board members or something, right? And so I'm a part of another bigger mission. And I think that's essential to, for me, that's been helpful in any level of networking, is how can I pour into people in a way that feeds their personal mission. And help, for me, it's really about helping people find alignment. Who do you want to be in the world and how far off are you from that? So when it comes to talking to these leaders, often white males, about their desire to be for women or their desire to have diverse perspectives surrounded around them, I have to show them that mirror in a way that reminds them of their mission and their own why, but also shows them how important it is in the space that they hold as a leader when they don't do that work, right? And so that's, for me, when I'm looking at connecting with people, I believe essentially because I think humans are beautiful. I think they matter, that we're all created for purpose, that I also step into human connections with the assumption that there is something also for me to learn from them. And so I think those things, being curious, recognizing the limit to how much you know, but then also just intrinsically valuing someone that there's a story that you can learn from. And that matters. And when we forget that, or we undervalue that, we end up missing out. Because every incident, every client I've worked with in my career, whether it was a positive experience or a negative experience, has definitely taught me something that's made me a more efficient leader, a more efficient communicator, and honestly, just a more compassionate and centered and whole and healed person, just because I've made those human connections with different kinds of people from different walks of life.
That is juicy. I really like that. I think that makes so much sense, and I think that's really important. And I'm going to make that connection to students right now, because I just want to make that very clear that there is a bridge here, because I think some students might say, oh, well, I'm not meeting with CEOs. I'm just trying to get a job. Nobody wants to be treated like a transaction. Just like you said, Denisha, it was so powerful. And as a student, you might think to yourself, well, if I've got no experiences, if I got nothing under my belt, whether that be internships or full-time job experience or any of that other stuff, like, what makes me interesting? Why would a company want to hire me? Or why would they want to have a conversation with me if I don't have any experiences? And what I find to be true very often is that, one, vulnerability can lead to so many different things. And that vulnerability could be just the mere fact of you saying, hey, I'm a college student. I don't have much experience, but I'm really fascinated about what you do. People love to talk about themselves. So I'd love to ask you, Denisha, what does genuine networking mean to you?
Wow, genuine networking to me is essentially vulnerability. Genuine networking is allowing yourself to be seen, and also at some point demanding to be seen. Because if it's like being in a bar and you're trying to pick up someone. Like, if you want that number, you're gonna have to make an effort, right? And as a college student, there was no path for what I do now. There was no clear, there weren't any roles around diversity and inclusion. We weren't even using the word diversity in the same way when I was in college, and so when LinkedIn, I might be dating myself, but when LinkedIn came out, I hopped on because of my curiosity. I love asking people questions, which is probably why I'm a consultant. I'm a why person. I want to know all the stuff. And I'm genuinely, again, curious about people and their stories. Because people being multifaceted, there's never a straight shot to anything. Even if you loved math and you became an accountant, I'm sure your journey to being an accountant, a CPA, the CFO has a lot of really cool stories and bumps and twists in the path. So I reached out to a ton of professionals I didn't know who had really cool, intriguing job titles on LinkedIn. Like, this is when LinkedIn first started. And I reached out to them, and I did exactly what you said. Like, I'm a college student. I'm juggling majors. I'm interested in this. I'm taking this kind of class, and I would really love to learn about what you do in a day. I really would like to learn more about how I can better prepare myself for the marketplace. Like, I pitched myself, what we now call as pitching. I was pitching myself to all kinds of professionals. And it was I've never forgotten this. I may not remember this person's name, but I've never forgotten this. Someone took my call in particular, and I was staring like, oh, I just feel like I need to have more clarity. The quarter life crisis that our generation goes through. I'm at 21. Like, I have to have all the answers to life. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to specialize in, and like, what should I do, and what degrees should I get? And I told her about my background, just like volunteer experience, professional interest, projects I've done in class. Like, she just asked me a lot of questions, and she's like, you don't need to focus on all these different areas. Just get really good at the thing you're good at. And then you can carve out, like, your passion, your commitment, your discipline is going to make you unique. It's going to carve out a lane for you on your own. You don't need to chase what everyone else is doing. You've done enough already. Now you really need to hone in on being disciplined in your craft and really learning and committing to knowing what you know, because that's what makes you an expert. That's what makes you a trusted professional. When you come into the workplace, we want to be able to see that you can commit to something and that you believe in yourself. And that was like a huge game changer for me. And even now, when I get insecure about networking, like, okay, this is someone who manages a fund that's quite big, and we're not in the same lane. I hear that professional's voice from LinkedIn, from a random email, like just putting myself out there. And I think that's essential for genuine connection, is allowing yourself to be seen and not always showing up with your representative, because people can see through that. Just like any relationship, if you can only pretend to be someone else for so long, and it's just easier to cut all that out and start with like where you really are, but you can share like where you want to be, and see who's willing to contribute to that journey.
I love that. And I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, there's so many things that you just said that I want to unpack. I mean, one, vulnerability makes tons of sense. I've shared the story with all the students. I was a drug dealer. And, you know, when I share that story with people, what's so interesting is it's the ultimate disarmer. Like, you look at me and no matter what, somebody has some form of bias around me, no matter what. When they see me, you got an assumption about who you think I am or where you think I've come from or anything like that. And the moment I share with you that I was a drug dealer, that I was facing prison time, that I was expelled from school, like, that's a moment where it's like, oh, shit, like, this is probably not who I thought this person was.
Right.
And it's the ultimate disarmer. And now I'm not saying go out and be a drug dealer, but I'm saying be vulnerable. When you share the stories that make people question about their preconceived notions about who they think you are based on their optics, the more you can get to actually building a deep bond with people and building that genuine relationship with them. And then the other thing I love that you said was this idea of really doubling down on yourself, of just building into something that you can be really good at. Will Smith has a saying, he says, any focus on your plan B is a distraction from your plan A.
Yes.
And I love that quote, because if we're talking about, well, I want to have a plan B just in case if this doesn't work out or that doesn't work out, like, somebody's going to take it from you. Somebody who's got all their chips in is going to take it from you, and they're going to win. I think, you know, here's an interesting analogy, because I was watching a YouTube video on it earlier, but Jeopardy, I was watching a Jeopardy video. It's like when you get the daily double and you get to wager how much money you want to wager on this question before it comes out. You could wager all your money, you could wager none of your money. You could be behind somebody in terms of your accolades, in terms of getting to where you want to be. But if they're hedging, if they're only putting a small bet on their daily double, and they might be right, they might be wrong, if you go all in, you can overtake them and get the opportunity. And even if you don't have all the accolades or all the credentials that somebody may not have. So I think that's something that's so critical that you brought up. And this goes for any career path, whether you want to be an investment banker or an engineer or anything. Yeah, Denisha, what do you think about that?
And don't get me wrong, okay? Because I'm all about personality profile tests. I love them. They're so much fun. I am a true Enneagram 6 wing 5. Like, I am the loyal critic, which probably makes me a good consultant. But like, I can be bought in. I can also be very traditionalist. Like, there's a lot of things about me that people think that they know that I'm like, oh, actually, I'm a much more conservative person. But I think people, because like when I'm bought into something, when I'm bought in, like, you can't tell me anything. And so I think all of us have degrees of that within us. And sometimes, which is so great about mentoring, is that you have someone else who can see that and like speak into that and pour into that and cheer you on. And you don't really find out who those people are or could be in your life without networking, right? Because I think there's so many projects that I've thrown myself into over the years that were with people I didn't even know, 5 years ago. So I've done some of the most daring things because of people I didn't know, and the relationship, a seed was planted and it was watered, and those relationships have been fruitful. And so I think that's, to really have, it's one of those things that like, you can't really get anything out of it if you're not willing to put something into it, and it's same with like how you want to be treated. You want to be cared about. You want someone to care about your feelings and your vision and your dream. And so when you're walking into networking opportunities, think about that, of like, not just what you can take, but also what you can contribute. Because I am a firm believer that where we put our hands, where we put our time, our treasure, all of that, it multiplies. And so you're accountable for what you choose to multiply and what you choose not to multiply. And, if you're more risk adverse, I still think there's at least one area in your life, because I'm a risk adverse and still I'm an entrepreneur, right? And I'm married to a very much go at it, full force opportunist entrepreneur. And he's, I can't remember who, if it's Grant Cardone or whoever, but he's all about fail fast, you know? And so I'm just kind of like, well, let's fail after we measure, let's measure all the possibilities. And I think just through networking, you can get out of your own way based on these relationships that you meet and other people who can push you past hard place and call you to challenges when you need it. So.
Yeah, I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I would love to take a moment to ask the students a question really quick. We kind of talked about this before, and I love to just start diving into this, but what is an area that you feel vulnerable? What is an area that you don't necessarily share with everybody, but you think might be an area that could make you interesting or could make you just vulnerable, or just something you don't share with everybody, but makes you unique? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. I know that might be a really big task that I'm asking you to do. I know that what I'm asking is probably a very big deal. Like, you've seen me share that I'm a drug dealer, but I practice that. It took me a little bit of testing over time. This could be your excuse. This could be your reason to start to share something that's unique about you. And the reason why I'm encouraging you to do this now in the comment section is because what you're going to find is that there's so much power in numbers. There's so much power in community and people embracing you for being vulnerable. You are about to find this out now. Your life is not going to be over from sharing this vulnerability. I would like to learn about it. Post in the comments section. I think this could be a really cool practice that, honestly, if you do it and you really lean into it, could be something that changes your life. Really, it could be something that absolutely, if you start feeling comfortable sharing a story that you're vulnerable about and you really haven't told many people about, and then you do it today, and all of a sudden all these people embrace you, you're going to feel so much more comfortable sharing it with more people too. So share it with us today. I think it could be a really powerful tool. So speaking of mentors, speaking of networking, Denisha, I love how you've shared about your mentors. I love how you talked about you can have multiple mentors, people that you give guidance to, or people that you give and receive guidance from. I guess I would love to know, have you ever had any stories where a mentor has helped you land opportunities just because you've had a really strong bond with them? And it wasn't, you didn't go into this relationship thinking that they would introduce you to XYZ person. It just developed over time, and they said, you know what, you're a really genuine person, or I really like you, Denisha. You got to meet this person, and develop into something great. Have you ever had a time of that?
Absolutely. I am high, as a disclaimer on the Strength Finders, I am high connectedness, and it's my number one. So everything in my life is connected. Everything has purpose. Everyone I meet. So for some people, it just sounds like I'm just full of a lot of belief and hope, and that is true. I'm not the most, highly optimistic person, but I don't believe in coincidences. So I had an unintentional accidental mentorship relationship that literally changed my life and moved me to Austin, Texas. So I was working with a university not too far from Kentucky, so not too far from your area of the country at that time. And so I went into a meeting with a provost, and I wanted to have one of these informational interviews help get me some guidance on like the next shift in my career. And at the time, however, I was also dealing with severe heartbreak. At the time, I had just quit my job, and then 2 weeks later ended an engagement, and like it was the most like Lifetime movie drama season of my life. And so I'm trying to hold it together, be a professional, don't look like a first time, employee. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to wow this person. And that is not what happened at all. And I think this is what's really cool about meeting a leader who's a very conscious leader, a servant leader, very in tune with people, because they called my bluff. Like, she cut through the BS within 5 minutes of me talking, and very intuitive leader. And she's like, okay, that's so nice, but let's talk about how are you? And this is granted, the first 5 minutes, I scheduled my appointment through her executive assistant. She's never met me before, right? So she just cut through it and shot me right at the heart. She's like, I see like all this stuff when you try to hold yourself really tight together, but I feel there's a different conversation we should be happening. So I want to make myself available so we can just get there. Let's just get there. And like, I within 2 minutes, I was in tears. Like, she ended up becoming a counselor, and that was the beginning of a very beautiful mentorship relationship. She helped me get and see, like, you can't really push performance when you're in a broken place. Like, you have to take care of yourself, and being professional and responsible is secondary to how your wellness is. And she's like, I'm in my 60s. Let me give you some life wisdom. You can only fake the funk for so long, and this will hurt your work. You know, eventually, whatever role you end up in, you have to deal with your stuff. And so that relationship, she ended up, you know, showing me how I should navigate getting a position with the University of Texas. She's in a totally different city, doesn't know anyone, you know, through her networks of asking about opportunities and helping me prepare. And I interviewed and got a job and moved cities like within a month. You know, it was super fast. And so that was probably the most powerful, meaningful example of a conscious, intuitive leader that really pays attention to who's sitting in front of them and can prioritize needs. And that helped me like check in with myself now as a leader when I'm talking to people of like, hey, let's not talk about tasks. Let's get the other stuff out of the way so you can actually hear what I'm saying. And this could be productive. And so I think that was a game changer. I would have never met my husband had I not moved here. It made it changed my entire life. Walking into her office thinking she's going to tell me, how do I become a D&I professional? Like, it didn't go anything like that. So
that's so cool. That's such a great story. I think students, when you're hearing this story, I want to just take it back. Life is not linear. It is not like this. It doesn't work like that. It goes up and down. It's all over the place. It just being open to the opportunities when they come your way, when actually hearing what they're saying, internalizing it, and being ready to act. You're in this mentor program because you're interested in taking that next step with your career, with your life, with your professionalism. You've got this mentor, and this mentor might be that person like Denisha said, but maybe they introduce you to somebody, or they open up your world to somebody else or something else, and that takes you down the next path. Really take everything that you've got as a gift, as an opportunity to learn and grow and develop, because it really can be so powerful. No matter who you're talking to, it's just whatever you put into it, you're going to get out of it. So you were at a place where you were ready to take it in and act, and that was super cool. Were you always great at networking, Denisha, or was this something that you had to practice and develop over time?
I would say I'm not good. I wasn't always good at networking. I think because I'm a high cognitive person, so every assessment I take, they talk about, I live in my brain. And growing up, I was definitely a young girl that sometimes people would assume I was standoffish, or I was preoccupied, or not very emotional or expressive. And so people would interpret that how they would interpret that, right? And I think through putting myself out there gradually, or being invested in people and cultivating, even just understanding what makes me feel safe around another person, to be vulnerable, to be more vulnerable. I think that helped me to get better at like, oh, networking is really just about having genuine conversations, multiple genuine conversations. And I didn't realize that I was great at networking until I started to move up a little bit more in my career, because I would get jobs, I would take a role, and somehow my job would always morph. I would always somehow get pulled into like a sales and marketing position, or employee relationships. And I just kept getting pulled in like, oh, hey, could you help us with mediation? I just got involved. I got pulled into a lot of people-focused tasks and projects without shooting my shot. And I would be picked up by all the network marketing people that always would like, you're so, like, you just make people feel good. You should be on my business team. It was just, I noticed a trend. And so I started asking people about that. And even at the advice of my spouse, I recently, to check in on how well I'm doing or where I need to improve in networking, I sent out like a survey to people I know, and just asked them to like critique me, give me feedback. How can I improve at communicating? What do body language? I just asked like random surveys of people that I know, or people that I've worked on projects with before. And And it was telling how many people were willing, even without still being connected in the workplace or haven't talked to in a while, who were still willing to give me that feedback. And to me, that was a sign of good networking, that even if you aren't engaged with them and you're not harassing them and emailing them, that people are still invested in you and feel that that relationship matters. That to me is evidence of good networking, of great networking, where if they had a question, they would call you. If they have a favor, they would be willing to do it for you. I think those are all like evidence of whether or not you're doing well at networking. Not so much always just monetary. It's just how people feel when they're in your space and if they're bought into supporting you and where you're trying to go.
Ooh, I love that idea. That's a great, I've never heard that before, but I think it's the idea of asking for feedback is so great. So I guess I'd love to ask the students, who are some people that you would like to reach back out to ask for feedback on your networking ability? State some names in the comment section. I love to learn about it. Try to come up with 2 to 3, maybe 5 people if you can. Denisha, I love what you said about just networking and that you weren't always great at it. It was something you developed with practice over time. I think that's so powerful and very reassuring for a lot of students, because I think a lot of them might think to themselves, well, I'm not good at networking, so I might as well just not be good at networking and like let it go. And it's like, you can't get really through life not being good at building genuine relationships. You can't, you have to. Like, no matter what, at work, you're going to have to be working with people, with humans. You're going to take instruction from somebody. Even if you run your own business, you're taking instruction from your clients. You're going to have to talk to somebody. And if you aren't there to build genuine relationships, you're going to be constantly frustrated at those that you work with, which the people you work with makes work so much more engaging and exciting. It's not just the work itself, it's who you're doing it with. So I think there's a lot of power to that. I guess what I'd be intrigued to ask you, because I think a lot of students might be afraid to get started, or like have a lot of the what ifs in their mind of like, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens, and they don't even get started. Are people generally helpful?
Yes. I think people, call it the human ego. People like to feel needed. People like to feel wanted and desired. Like, not even just romantically, because people always assume when you say that's romantic. It's not even that. Like, people, we're constantly on this journey. Like, if you think about how often in our lives we're like, why am I here? We're constantly trying to find purpose. And I'm huge on community and human relationships fuel our purpose and our passions in more ways than we think. And I feel, out of my faith, I believe humans are built for community. And so we don't even develop who we are. This is just my D&I. We don't even develop how we identify in a vacuum. We identify ourselves based on in relativity to other people and relationships. And so people genuinely want to help. People want to be a part of your story. And I'll never forget when, I think I've shared this with you before, when I had a supervisor on my last day of my job was like, hey, I really think my one takeaway for you would be, I think you underestimate how much people want to be a part of what you're doing. And that was a game changer for me of like, even if it's easier, the African proverb, even if it feels like it's easier for me to go at it alone, I can go further and faster when I'm inviting people to be a part of this. And it's also way more fun. I mean, it's boring. And for those who are doubtful about, putting yourself out there, I am essentially in all the ways a real introvert. And I had to really spend time unpacking like what's true about some of the things we've been taught and what's a lie and what's not true, what's a myth, because introverts make awesome leaders. Introverts are really good at communication and connections. That's actually like what fuels us is like those deep, meaningful interactions. And there are a lot of people, especially our extroverts, who really love being seen in that way of like, I feel special. If anything, I say take your introvert or extrovertism as a superpower. You really just invest in yourself, like double down, like you said, on yourself. Figure out, how do I leverage what I'm good at and take it to the next level? How do I leverage what comes natural and easy and leverage that to make me a better connector and a better networker? Because I am all about a net that works. That's the whole point of networking. You don't know what you're going to need these relationships for, but you want them to be fueled and cultivated and in a healthy place where you don't feel like a sense of what I call bondage. You don't feel tightly wounded up and where you harm yourself by not asking for help when you know people that could help you. You know, that's the most devastating thing ever, is when you meet people who are social and have connections and they're struggling to find solutions to problems and they're struggling to get help. And you're just like, how do you have all of these people around you and you're struggling in silence? So that whether you take that as like a mental health thing or in business or in schoolwork, it's like one part of it is getting over yourself. You have to get over yourself, but also really starting from a place of belief that other people want to help. And that type of positivity, like humans, we can go negative really fast. So you have to cultivate this skill of being able to zap yourself of like, hey, no, I'm going to choose to believe that there are people who want to help me. There's more people who want to be a part and want to help than people who don't. And those people are going to find me and I'm going to find them. And I think that, you know, that's something you can start as earlier than college, honestly. Middle school is probably where we need to start it. I think kids will probably be nicer if we had like really cultivated that culturally, but you know, anytime, no time like the present.
I love it. I think that's awesome. I love to ask the students one last question. What are you going to do now that you've learned all this information from Denisha? What can you do right now to get started, to build genuine relationships? Post in the comment section. I love to learn. What are you going to start doing tonight? What are you going to start doing tomorrow? What are you going to start doing immediately to start building genuine relationships with people? Whether that be both rekindling relationships you've already got or building new relationships with people you like to build relationships with. Share in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. Denisha, I'd also love to ask you about vulnerability. When and how do you determine when the right time is to be vulnerable with somebody else?
You know, I am still working through that. That is still one of my growing edges, growth opportunities. But I think I've become a little bit more in tune with some of my visceral responses, right? So when I feel this tightness in my chest or my throat, or I feel the knots in my stomach, or I feel this conviction, this push to open my mouth and say something, and I start going to the rabbit trail of, oh, no one wants to hear that. Once I start telling myself that no one wants to hear what I have to say, that is usually my sign where I need to be vulnerable. I don't know how many times I've been in a classroom as a student, as a learner, people are like, there are no such things as a stupid question. And you're just like, yes, there is. You know, like you're telling yourself a different narrative. I feel like that's the same thing when it comes to vulnerability. Like it does take vulnerability to put your hand up and say like, hey, this is my story, or hey, this is my need. This is the question that I have. And it's so interesting, even as an educator who talks about hard stuff like racism. I have people in classes talking about like their family and generational trauma with complete strangers, and you can't get people to open themselves up without modeling vulnerability, you know. And I think in every function or work that we do, I feel like everyone's purpose is tied to vulnerability. You know, you have to be able to tell people where you are and be able to stand and like, this is what I've been called to do in this particular vehicle at this season. So if you are just intrinsically an educator or a teacher, you may do that in the classroom, you may do that at a corporate room, but that's your goal is to help people learn anyway. That's going to require you to model vulnerability of like, these are moments when I didn't know what the heck I was talking about, right? There's a lot of liberation and vulnerability. And so for me, when I want to scale back and hide, that is always the sign that I need to be more vulnerable.
That is awesome. And I think there's even greater applications to just even unconscious bias within that. Like I can think to myself when I was younger in the classroom, I was that kid that always raised the hand. I was like, when the music would be playing, I'd be that weird kid that was dancing. Why? Because I never had any negative like social consequences of ever doing any of that growing up. Like there was never anybody who told me there was any such thing as a stupid question. So literally I was the kid asking stupid questions, but I didn't care because, or rather it's not really that I didn't care. I was so naive that I didn't even realize that other people might think that those were silly things to do. But I was lucky. And that's the thing, that's where my own kind of bias existed, was I didn't realize that other people were going through similar things, or going through things, that weren't similar, that they were going through their mind of like, oh, this is probably a dumb question. I probably shouldn't ask this. Like, music's playing, I shouldn't be dancing. Like, I should probably just like stand on the wall, look at other people, see if it's cool. Like, is it cool to dance? I don't know. Are you dancing? Are they okay? Are we doing that? Okay, cool. We can dance. Okay, cool.
A lot of doubt.
Like, literally, that's what people are doing through their mind. And I only learned that after like hearing kind of other people. I was definitely made fun of as a kid, but it wasn't enough that I like ever was conscious of it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. It's funny. I think that's the beautiful thing about networking. And I would be happy to share my because I think it's not so much a secret, but I found it very powerful. So if you would like me to share like my pickup line for networking that helps me, I'm happy to. So one thing I always ask people, I have a variety, but one of my favorite things to ask people when I'm at a networking event, a conference, if I get a little circle going, I ask them what's the best compliment they've ever received. And I get so much out of people with that question. I mean, I've learned about people's divorces. I've found out about abandonment issues. I found out how it brightens their day that someone thinks that they're sexy. Like, I mean, you name it, I've heard it. And it also, when I say that curious part about networking, I think one of the things that always made me oddly great at sales, unintentional sales and marketing, was you need to listen and pay attention. So when I would see people, I would be picking up a conversation that we had 3 months ago. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, how are your twin daughters doing at school? Like, you need to pay attention and remember those things. And that goes a long way. So I'm either going to flatter you when I know what makes your day bright, or I'm going to really pay attention and check up on you when you said like, hey, my kids are starting school for the first time, or this was my 1-year-old, first time saying mama or some dada or whatever, in the virtual place, paying attention to what people are being vulnerable with and honoring that. I think that is a game changer for networking, is really being an active listener and showing people that I care. I think it goes a long way.
I love that. I'm going to steal that if you're okay with that. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah. It's not stealing if I gifted it to you. So it's
That's a powerful question. So actually,
it matters to people. So yeah.
To the students, what is the greatest compliment you've ever received? Post in the comment section. That's such a powerful question. Awesome. Well, Denisha, this has been an incredible workshop this evening. I think the students have gotten a ton out of this. I know I certainly have. I know a lot of our students use LinkedIn frequently. How can our students learn more about are you all right if they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on Instagram. It's Denisha Speaks. And where else am I? My website, all that information is on my LinkedIn, but either of those two places you can find me.
Awesome. Well, hey, Denisha, this was great. Thanks for being here. Students, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your night. See everybody.
Thank you.